Hey guys, I just wanted to pop in real quick and give you kind of an update. I am working on a video right now, I should say a series of videos that are going to dive into the book of Revelation. As I've been studying it over the last 2 weeks or so, the more I study, the deeper I get, the more layers are getting peeled back. It is probably going to be multiple hours of information that I'm sharing, and so it's probably going to get broken up into multiple videos. I'm hoping to release the first one, to make the first one in the next 3 or 4 days, but I just wanted to share that along with studying as a watchman, when I'm looking for information to share with my fellow servants about the times and seasons in which we're living, I also have my own personal studies. So normally my personal studies are for me as a child of Christ. I'm looking to grow my relationship with him and the people around me. But I did have something that I wanted to share with you from what I was studying over the last couple of days. There's over history, 1900 years since the New Testament was completed. There's been a lot of times when men and women, but especially men, have cherry-picked certain verses out of the Bible to justify their own selfish ambitions and desires. One of those is Ephesians chapter 5:22, which pretty much every English translation is going to say, wives, submit to your husbands. And so that gets cherry-picked and used as a way for selfish, self-centered men to essentially say that their wives are supposed to do whatever they say. But you really need to look at the overall context of the message that Paul was writing to the church in Ephesus, and by proxy writing to us. The more that I've studied Paul's letters, the more that I've realized that he was a bit of a wordsmith, and he was also really clever in the ways that he wrote things and the ways that he brought everything together and summarized and then presented his messages. And there's no exception here with Ephesians. When he's writing chapter 5 of Ephesians, which again, there's no chapter breaks in the letters, when he gets to that point in Ephesians 5:22, he just spent the last several passages, basically the last half of chapter 4 and the first half of chapter 5, talking to the church as a whole and telling them that with their words and their deeds, they should be lifting each other up. And then what nobody seems to point out is chapter 5, verse 21, right before verse 22, he says, therefore, submit yourselves to one another. You look back at everything that he wrote before then, he's talking about not having basically vulgar language, using your words and your actions to lift each other up. And so the Greek word that's translated as submit has to do with putting yourself underneath, but also has to do with lifting someone else up. So when he says submit yourselves to one another, he's not saying that you can put yourself under that person and they can put themselves under you, etc. He's saying that you should all be using your words and your actions to lift each other up. And then in the chapter 5, verse 22, the word submit is not even in there. The Greek word that he used in verse 21 is not in verse 22. It basically says, and wives, to your husbands be also. You can read that a lot of different ways. And the reason it gets translated as wives submit to your husbands is because of the verse right before that, where he says, you guys should all submit to one another. But the term submit, in the context of everything that he's just got done talking about, involves lifting each other up. And so the next bit, a lot of pastors, male and female, will say, yeah, it says wives submit to your husbands, but more importantly, what it says after that is for husbands to love your wives as Christ loved the church. And he uses the Greek word agape there, which is the sacrificial love of Jesus. So basically what Paul is saying in those next groups of verses with husbands love your wives as Christ loved the church is you need to be willing to, as a husband, as a man, to subject your own wants and desires and put those as secondary behind the wants and desires and needs of your wives. And so what he's saying to the husbands there is to love genuinely and sacrificially to your wives. And what he's saying to the wives is lift up and encourage your husbands. And what that does is it creates a positive feedback loop where one feeds into the other. In a wholesome, healthy marriage, you have wives who are offering words of encouragement to their husbands, who are acting out their genuine sacrificial love for their wives. And those two things build upon each other. It's almost like Paul was writing Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus 2,000 years ago, because that is psychologically the things that motivate men and motivate women to do better in their lives and their relationships. You have men who, while they might be temporarily motivated by success or money or prestige, ultimately the thing that motivates them to continue doing the things that they need to do, that are right for them to do, are respect and words of affirmation. And that's why so many men throw themselves into their jobs and their careers, because when they go there, they feel respected and encouraged, and they continue to thrive off of that. Ultimately, that's an empty fulfillment because it's not coming from the relationship that matters the most to you. So if you as a husband are throwing yourself into your marriage and sacrificing your own wants and desires to fulfill the needs of your wife, you are fulfilling God's command to love your wife as Christ loved the church. And as a wife, if you are offering words of encouragement and respect to your husband, not only are you fulfilling God's desire for you as a wife, you're also encouraging and motivating your husband to continue doing the things that he's doing for you as his wife. His most intimate human connection. And later on, when Paul talks about the mystery of a son leaving his family and cleaving to his wife and the two becoming one flesh, he's saying that that's a mystery because of what happens when you have that positive feedback loop. And they are so in tune with each other that they actually are encouraging and loving each other. And that is the things that motivate each of them. Now, this was a revolutionary statement in Paul's time. If you go to the cultural aspect of it, at that time, wives were essentially property. The husband's father would negotiate a price to purchase the bride, and she became property of the husband. So, if you have a society that's saying wives are property, and this guy comes along and says, no, women, wives have power, and it's so much power that it's important for them to understand that that power is to be used in a way that will build their marriage. It's not about submitting or being oppressed by the husband. It's about lifting up the husband, because that is the most powerful tool that women in general, have when it comes to motivating men to become men of God, to fulfill their call and love their most intimate relationship, and by extension, the people around them. You have a good relationship with Jesus, you have a relationship with your wife, and then you have a relationship with the rest of the world. Sorry for the interruption there. My phone overheated, and I'm overheating. I'm sitting in my car outside of my parking lot. What I was just about to finish up with saying, though, is Paul will give a long list of things that sound like repetition, and then he will sum it all up. And he does that with chapter 21, when he says, submit yourselves to one another. That's in reference to all the things that he just got done saying. He summed up all of that stuff. He does the same thing with the husband and wife situation, and he basically boils down all of the stuff that he said over about 8 verses as: husbands, love your wives more than you love yourselves, and wives, respect and encourage your husband. And that's what it all boils down to. The command that he was giving was the understanding that acts of service and sacrificial love motivates wives, and words of encouragement and respect motivates husbands. It's ironic that this is something that got twisted into misogyny and men suppressing women and women feeling like they should be doormats, because that's never been what Paul was talking about. So that's why it's so important to me and so important to you that you're not just a sheep who's in church listening to what some other sheep is telling you, because sheep will follow the sheep that's right in front of them, even if that sheep is about to go drown. It's not until they hear the voice of the good shepherd that they turn and go the right direction. So you need to be able to study the actual word of God and the things that the messengers of God were saying, and understand that there's a lot of lost sheep in the world who are trying to guide you the wrong direction. So again, I just want to summarize everything here. Paul was not telling women to be doormats. In fact, he was saying, you are so much more powerful than you think you are. You're not property. You're the most important thing in this man's life. And the best thing that you can do as a wife is to encourage and respect him, because that will motivate him to love and sacrifice and give to you, as well as the people around him. And that's what we're all called to do, is to encourage and love one another. But the most important relationships that we have on a human-to-human level is that of husband and wife. And that's why it was so important to Paul, and that's why it should be so important to you. I love you guys. I hope you have a great day. I cannot wait to make the videos on Revelation. It is just a lot of study, and I am working away on it. I'm going to do my best in the next 3 or 4 days here to get the first one out. Until then, I'll see you later.